All the emojis are there, so we are live. Good afternoon and welcome to this evening's session on what's new in social media. My name is Luan. I'm your host of this panel session this afternoon. This is actually my fourth commsHERO event, my first virtual one, but my fourth commsHERO event. So very excited to be back. Thank you for inviting me back again. I'll introduce my colleagues in a moment. If you have got questions throughout the session, please do pop them in the Q&A. We'll be keeping an eye on that. We have got time for questions at the end. If we haven't met before, I am a marketing consultant. I've worked in the world of social media for a long time now, both as agency, client side and consultancy. I guess my deep dive specialism is consultancy around social media. I'm currently working with a law firm, university, manufacturer, household cleaning products. I train and write courses for LinkedIn. I train on behalf of Facebook and Instagram as well, and have a really nice kind of variety of people I work with and observations on all the changes that are happening all the time. And my colleagues I've invited along this afternoon to chat along with us about the social media changes that are happening. I'll let them introduce themselves, but these are the people that I often talk to about what's happening in the world of social media. So without further ado, Alison, please introduce yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alison, and I am founder and social media consultant of Avocado Social. Avocado Social is my own social media consultancy, which I set up 7 years ago now. I've been working in the industry for 12 years, working with brands including John Lewis, Tesco, Pringles, the BBC, as well as a wide range of businesses and organisations, including universities, insurance companies, law firms, you name it, I've worked with them. So I would say my specialism is really around Facebook and Instagram, and particularly the ad side. So I'm really excited to share with you some of the latest strategies from those.
Brilliant, thanks Alison. And the gentleman that I do a monthly webinar with, if you haven't seen us co-present before, then hopefully you will join us at some point. Andy.
Thanks, Luan. Yeah, really pleased to be here. So I'm Andy. I'm one of the founders of this company called contentCal, which is a social media product shaped like a calendar, funnily enough. And yeah, as Luan said, spend most of our time talking about the updates, trends, changes that are happening in the world of social. And yeah, for our sins, we have to spend our life working with these networks to figure out what's happening with them so that we can orientate our product in the right way. So yeah, excited to share some trends and changes with you today.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. And then a gentleman that I know has also been to a commsHERO event because I took him along with me several years ago. First met him when he was presenting on stage, and then worked with you on presenting, which always petrifies me now when I'm speaking with you standing next to me. John, there's no slides, so I'm not going to get anything wrong.
It's fine, Luan. You're doing marvellously.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John, Head of Communications for Rooftop Housing Group. I've been in the housing sector for the last 5 years or so. Before that, I was a freelance trainer and consultant, working with a lot of organisations on their conventional media approaches and interview skills and presentation skills. And prior to going freelance, I was with the BBC for 16 years as a presenter, producer, writer, journalist, and basically anything that they would get me to do. So yes, I'm here, sort of the other side of the fence for this conversation.
Great. And that's a bit about us. We want to know a little bit about you, who's watching this session live. So we're going to start with a poll, which will hopefully come up on the screen in a second. It's a very easy poll. A quick question. Lee, have you got that poll for us? Here we go. Which social media platform do you use the most? And we're talking work purposes here. We'd love to know which of the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, you use the most for work right now. If you could just vote on your screen. I think we can vote as well. We've got 15 votes so far, so if we can just get a few more. We're going to talk across all of these this evening. we got Facebook way out in front with Twitter not far behind. A couple more, then Lee, if you could close the first poll for us. That's now closed. It looks like Facebook is way out in front with 42% of you, followed by Twitter, and then LinkedIn, and then Instagram. That's quite surprising. Not too many votes, but none for Pinterest or TikTok. So we will talk about that later, but good to know where you're all at in terms of what you're using. So a quick second poll with a slightly different question. If you could put the next one up for us, Lee. My next question is, which social media platforms drive the most success for you? Again, in a work context, this may be the same as the first poll. It may be a slightly different answer, but if you could vote on this one for us, it'd be good to know where you're all at. Oh, votes are coming in quicker on this one. So remember, Facebook was in the lead for the platform most people are using. So I think we've got just a few more votes on this one. So Lee, let's close this one and see the final results. So most votes for Facebook. So more votes for Facebook in terms of getting success than the ones that you use most often. No votes here for Instagram, which is an interesting one, Alison. I'm sure you'll pick up on that one. But Twitter and LinkedIn are in the results for that one too. So thank you for sharing with us. So let's move on. We'll pick up some of those. I'm sure our heads are all thinking about those results already as we start thinking about the fact that social media changes every day. Both Andy and I talk weekly about social media updates. We share them. I do an email, Andy does a video. We come together in a webinar. I know Alison is always sharing these in her Facebook group and answering questions on them in training as well. So the one thing that is constant is how much this world changes. Sometimes minor things that don't really make a big difference to what we're doing. Sometimes there's some big activities as well. And I was looking through my notes and emails earlier, and for me, a few of the big things. We're nearly in October, so I can't just say this year so far. But I know Andy will pick up on audio and the trend on audio that we've had this year. Stories as a content format has been a big change this year. Come and gone. Fleets have come and gone on Twitter. Stories have come and gone on LinkedIn. Instagram, not many of you using it or getting results, and that's really interesting by itself. But they recently shared that they are not just a photo sharing app, that they are also about video content, and huge trends in them trying to take on TikTok with Reels and what's happening there. And I think another big trend that I will say the word, it's coming up to Christmas. It's less than 100 days. The social media platforms have been doing a lot to support small businesses in the world of e-commerce. We've seen a lot of new features around that over the past few months, and I'm sure there's going to be even more to come as we do that run up to Christmas this year. Now, I know we talk about trends, but Andy, you're a bit of a data geek as well, and we always start our monthly sessions by you sharing some of the data headlines. What's the big trends that you've seen in insights and reports?
There's probably about three things, actually. It's a bit of a spoiler alert for our monthly roundup, which we'll do on Thursday. So three trends. I'd be interested in others' viewpoints on it, but certainly from what I'm noticing, social commerce, as it's called, or e-commerce, you might want to call it, targeted at social. We already touched on this, Luan. Looked at the growth rates of that over the last 5 years and how the forecast of that map the next 5 years. So it's forecast to be a $78 billion industry, social commerce, by 2025. So that's growing at a compound annual growth rate of about 26%. So absolutely massive in that regard. The second piece is about live streaming, interestingly. And we started to see a large growth of the use of live streaming, predominantly on Facebook and Instagram, but also now on TikTok as well. And so that the data would tell us is that that is where the predominance of engagement is happening around live streams, particularly on Facebook, where the median average engagements for every live stream is around 46. So yeah, live streams fundamentally are the most engaging content format if you take a step back macro look at it, which is really interesting because they're not utilized that heavily, certainly by businesses and organizations. And the other key news stories from the last month is that TikTok has overtaken YouTube in terms of the amount of time that people spend on the app. And that's really the main war for all of these social platforms. They want people to spend all of their quality time immersed in these applications. So yeah, predominantly, YouTube has always won out for that, but TikTok has just overtaken them. So the average person, if you're a stat geek, the average person now spends 24 hours per month on TikTok, which is frankly insane if you ask me, but hey.
It's a long time, isn't it? A long time. Alison, to pick up on the e-commerce and around ads, I know that you're probably working with some retail clients on that. What have you seen?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. We've all know, well, you noted yourself, Luan, that just in the last couple of days, we've just seen a huge push for Christmas, and a lot of brands are making sure that they're getting everything set up, ready for Christmas. So in terms of what you can do, there's obviously getting your shop online, with Facebook and Instagram now having an integrated shop within your platforms. TikTok are also looking at shopping tags within the platform as well. So I think we're just going to see more and more of these platforms allowing you to tag in products. At the moment, you can't sell services, so you can only sell physical products. So that is something to bear in mind around eligibility. But who knows, that might change. We never know what's going to change.
We don't get, even working with these platforms, we don't get any heads up.
No, we just get hints, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, try and work it out. And the other change that, has been quite significant, or the reports have been significant around advertising, has been the iOS changes. What have you seen? Have you seen this change?
Oh, yes, we have seen this change. So from May onwards, for those of you that aren't aware, there was a huge Apple privacy update, which meant that Apple was giving people the ability to opt out of any tracking within certain apps that they're using. This, of course, is only affecting iPhone users, not Android. So it's not something that you're seeing across the board, but it's mainly your Facebook activity and your Facebook pixel specifically that is affected. So what many of our clients are reporting is that they're suddenly not able to track as many purchases or certain conversion activities such as leads or contact forms via their Facebook dashboard, because suddenly Apple users who have opted out of this tracking are not being picked up by the pixel. The other thing that we're seeing across the board is if you are using social media advertising on Facebook to target what's called a custom audience. So this is an audience where you provide the source to Facebook. That could be visitors of your website. It could be email addresses that you have gathered. Whatever it is, that means that this customer has had some sort of relationship with your business before. So if you're using that type of remarketing, you are suddenly finding that it's not as effective for you because of the iOS changes. So Apple users who have opted out of being tracked are no longer able to see your ads targeting a custom audience. So there are a few things that you can do. First of all, I would suggest not strongly relying on a custom audience as your audience targeting. There are loads of other things you can target in terms of social media advertising, from job titles to workplace to demographics to interests. Also, the other type of advertising audience that works very well is called lookalike audiences. And this is one that's automatically generated by Facebook that is similar to your custom audience. So we're still seeing that that is working effectively. The other thing I would suggest is thinking about other ways that you can drive people into your marketing funnel so that you're not so reliant on this Facebook pixel creating a custom audience for you. So there are lots of changing parts all the time. Facebook are bringing out new advice. They're working so hard behind the scenes on how to ensure that there are plenty of other ways that you can advertise and find your audience. So although there are some very negative reports out there saying that Facebook adverts are 40% less effective than they used to be, I don't think that's going to be the way that the land lies for a while. Facebook are incredibly focused on bringing out lots of new advertising options. So just something to make sure that you read up on. You can find out lots of advice online about what you can do to make sure your business is in the right position.
Yeah, it's just changing what we do all the time in line with these changes, isn't it? And advertising is important. Many of us are in businesses to generate an income, and actually that's another area that we see coming up quite a lot in our updates, Andy, isn't it, around monetization and what the platforms are doing. I think the latest news this week is that you can now tip on Twitter with Bitcoin. It's going to be an interesting one. Ticketed spaces. What are your thoughts on these other areas of monetization, Andy?
Yeah, it's a very interesting area. So some of it's a bit gimmicky, like tipping with Bitcoin, purely just down to Jack Dorsey's, who's founder of Twitter, infatuation with cryptocurrency. But yeah, some of that's a bit more kind of distraction and noise from the underlying foundational shift that's happening in the world of social, which is around this creator economy. And that's really going to shape the direction of social moving forward. Because fundamentally, when you look at the amount of money that each of these platforms are putting up to attract people to those platforms, so Snapchat invest $1 million a day into getting people to use their Spotlight feature, which is their take on TikTok and short form video. $1 million a day, utterly insane. Then YouTube kind of topped that by investing $500 million into creators. LinkedIn have done the same. Twitter have done the same. Fundamentally, what we're seeing here is a war for talent at the scale that we see the same kind of war for talent against like Netflix, Disney versus Amazon. And it's that kind of level of creator that these platforms want. And what's happening now as a result of getting people being the platforms, trying to get this talent to the platform. When they get the right talent to the platform, it means the content gets better, which means more people flood to the platform. People spend more time on the platform as a result, and more niche communities are formed as a result. And that really is the underlying shift that we're seeing. Twitter in particular, we talk about this lots, Luan, like Twitter in particular, building so many features very quickly to really capitalize on this. You've already touched on like the audio spaces, which is a competitor to Clubhouse. Twitter communities will be coming out next month. They're alternative to Facebook groups. We've seen, as you said, like ticketed spaces, so you can start charging for events. Like the charging of the commsHERO event could have been done all through a Twitter space, for example, if you want to be that progressive. And the super follows thing, so you can pay to follow people and get an exclusive content. And all of that might seem quite far-fetched, but really this is becoming the new reality of social. And I think that actually represents a really interesting opportunity for organizations personally, because even though communities get more fragmented, communities get smaller, more niche orientated, it provides so much more of an opportunity for organizations to work with those creators to target and get those messages into said communities. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm quite passionate about this whole creator economy thing.
I agree with you, because we talked about the fact that we like that there is now a name and that there is resources specifically aimed at creators. It's not just users anymore, is it? There's a whole nother level for it. Some brilliant stuff. Now, John, it is our jobs. This is what we do day in, day out, is keep up with all these changes. It's part of what we do. But how do you stay up to date and manage this client side when it's not everything that you're doing all day?
Well, I think it's been really interesting just listening to Alison and Andy about the money involved in these big platforms when I'm working in a third sector organisation with literally no budget to do any of these glorious things. And we really, it's taking that option to find where the audiences we expect are sitting, the audiences that we want to hit, and then very much choosing those platforms to align with who those audiences are. So from a housing association perspective, which is where I'm working, it's finding those default platforms for the people that are using our services, and then targeting as much effort as possible onto those default platforms. So Facebook is massive in our world, simply because the demographics of the people that we're trying to reach are very much aligned with the demographics of Facebook. We actually do quite a bit of live streaming that I try and nudge people into. Our chief executive live streams after every board meeting, so we can have a Q&A session, which really sort of builds that involvement and that connection with the audiences and that connection with our service users. And that's proved really popular, but it's also made a slight rod for our own back, because we've now got a new default communications channel that isn't aligned to any of our usual channels. It's not aligned to our housing management system or our phone system, or it's sort of running parallel to everything else. Because we're out there having that conversation then happens there. And I think part of what we're needing to explore within the changes of social media is, how do we then align that default channel back to us, to getting that information back in our organisations. And I think that's going to be the next big challenge for organisations like ours, because nothing's built to talk to each other. So getting the data out is difficult. Getting the conversations out is difficult. But really, it's for us, like I say, it's all about finding those default channels to the audiences we need. We use Twitter for stakeholders. Our audiences, our service users don't live there. We're finding more on Instagram. We're doing a little bit more on Instagram, but that's simply to target our youth, our people who are working our youth services. But even then, the people who are now coming into our youth services, we've got to start aiming at TikTok and thinking, well, how the hell do we start getting cut through on TikTok as a housing association? With the next demographic we're targeting comes the next default for them. So it's about finding those, I feel, for that.
And I think you picked up on something there, which is always a challenge, isn't it? Is that it's a channel first question sometimes of, here's a new channel, what do we do with it? Whereas we wouldn't do that in anything really outside of social media or before social media. We'd have our plan, we'd have our objectives, we'd have our budget, what do we need to achieve? What's the best way of doing it? Now it's, there's something new and shiny coming along, and your colleagues are probably saying, we should be on this, we should be doing that, and you then happen to go, our audience isn't there, or we need to experiment, we need to watch a bit longer and see what's happening. And I think that's the exciting thing, but also the challenge of having to maintain the day job, maintain what you're already delivering and achieving, without getting distracted by the shiny things that are going on. And I want to try something new and see what's going on. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, whether we're in this world every day or whether we're kind of in a client side organisation as well. Because client side, it's not just you, John, it's your colleagues and your chief exec and everyone else that you've got to bring on board with this stuff. And maybe there's a whole nother panel session, isn't there, on stakeholder engagement and presenting and getting buy-in, and we won't go there. That is a big FAQ. But Andy, do you want to talk about that piece of content, not just TikTok or the specific channels, but the content trend around audio that's happened this year?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, this one, because I guess this was really kicked off in April of last year, thanks to Clubhouse and everyone thinking it was an absolute novelty to get away from your screen and listen to something rather than watch something. So that then got incredibly popular, and probably created a bit of a bubble in itself, which kind of burst when a bit of normality hit us and we could actually go out of our houses again. And ever since, like, the whole kind of fear of missing out thing from Clubhouse diminished, as in like this invite only thing, it hasn't really had the same buzz around it. That being said, there's still 700,000 active rooms happening every day on Clubhouse, and it's still a really interesting content format, especially for ones, for creating the more kind of deeper, more personal connection, because nothing really connects quite like the human voice. And it probably is in very much the same kind of use case as what you mentioned, John, for I think it's your chief exec, hosting those, the live stream, right? So it's that kind of personal connection. And we're seeing more and more kind of niche communities pop up from a Clubhouse perspective. But clearly, all of the other platforms want in on that too. Hence, we're seeing, good growth happening on Twitter audio spaces, which I personally rate that a little bit more than Clubhouse. It's more integrated into the rest of our comms strategies, because most of us, as would have been demonstrated by the poll you ran, Luan, many of us use Twitter as our secondary channel. So I'm quite excited about the potential of that. And then LinkedIn in 2 weeks will release their version of it too. So it's very much becoming ubiquitous, like stories are across the platforms. Whether it's going to be something that will stay as a mainstay content format across all the platforms, because it turned out that not everyone wants to consume stories on all platforms. So maybe not everyone's going to want to consume audio on every platform. But certainly I find it a very interesting thing for like deeper topics amongst a kind of smaller niche community. So yeah, very interested in it.
And I think the other interesting thing around Clubhouse was, it happened at a time when we're in lockdown, out of lockdown, living in a different world. But that whole kind of early adopter thing as well that happens with new features, you could see a flood of people running to it straight away. I need an invite, I need to get on, versus other people that were kind of like, I'm not worried about this yet. I've got other things to be working on. And that's always a balance, I think, with these new and shiny features as well.
Yeah, sometimes a wait and see approach is the more pragmatic one, rather than, and the same could be applied to TikTok, although it's fair to say that TikTok isn't going away anytime soon. Yes,
we just need to see how it could work for us or our clients and how it fits. Alison, as a fellow trainer, we get asked questions all the time, but I know we're in I do a lot more LinkedIn training, you do a lot more Facebook and Instagram. What questions do you get asked most often in your training?
I think that's a really good question, because obviously some of the most common ones come around a lot. We're often answering things around the best scheduling tools, the best planning and process and measurement tools. I would say, in terms of what I'm being asked more at the moment, is this question about, should I be on TikTok? Should I be using Instagram Reels? Are these features that we really do need to listen to seriously? My answer to that question is always going back to your strategy. Where are your audience? How is your audience currently using these platforms themselves? One of the things that I've done a couple of times over the last few months as part of a client project is actually done a bit of research in TikTok to see what people are actually saying about certain topics, products, services, just general kind of conversation themes. So you can get a really good understanding of whether or not there does need to be a presence on the platform. And actually, many of the companies that we're working with have decided, do you know what, TikTok isn't a platform that we feel we have the resource to manage at the moment. However, there are conversations happening there that we feel we need to have some sort of level of engagement with. So many of the people that we're dealing with at the moment are considering using influencers or customers as ways to actually be present on the platform. So whether that's an influencer outreach campaign that you're using specifically on TikTok, or whether you're simply just encouraging customers to create UGC content about you, there are ways that you can approach it without having to manage your own channel and update it all the time. In fact, for anybody out there who's really looking to recruit, one of our clients has recently run a very successful recruitment campaign on TikTok targeting 18 to 24-year-olds. So there are some quite clever ways that you can approach these platforms. The other one that I do get asked a lot at the moment is around engagement. Why has my engagement gone down? How do I increase my engagement? Why aren't I getting likes, comments, and shares anymore? What's happening? So I think a lot of what we're seeing is the algorithms are getting crunched because there's just so much content out there. As Andy mentioned earlier, it's about finding what kind of content does create the most engagement. It might be different for you. You might find video performs better. You might find multi-image posts perform better. But work out what resonates best with your audience and then figure out ways to create more of that content. I would also suggest that on Instagram in particular, it's the newer features that are getting the higher engagement. So that's why I think Reels is seeing such a moment, because people are giving it a go because they've heard if you post a Reel, it can sometimes get more engagement than some of your other content on Instagram. So lots of experiments to be done. And the best way we all know to learn in social media is to test it out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's testing and looking at your own data and the audiences. But I love your point about user generated content as well. I think I said one of my clients is in the household cleaning sector, and it's all user generated content because people love to show themselves using this product, living their lives with this product, what they're doing, other uses for it as well. So it's great for us because we can just share all of that across our stories and other content. So lots of ways. John, what are your thoughts on Reels, TikToks, shiny things?
I'm a man in my late 40s, so obviously I just nod and smile when people speak to me about them. For us, really, it's a question of, is this our space? Is this authentic that we should be using this particular platform? Again, it's quite platform-led. If we're going to be going onto TikTok as a social housing provider, is that something that's just going to clothe us in this sort of, it's the classic Steve Buscemi meme of hello, fellow kids. Are we going to end up being the hello, fellow kids when we're hanging around on TikTok trying to produce content to engage people? The other issue for me is, when are we going to have to start almost moving up the line of the different social medias? Because ultimately the Facebook natives are going to die. The Facebook native generation are going to start dropping off the end. We're all getting older. It's really difficult to try and judge the click over point when something has become a default, when something has become big enough to deal with. And I think Alison, that's a really interesting point that you've been making about sort of farming the other content and seeing what people are talking about using these newer platforms, rather than just having that moment of, right, we've got to do TikTok because everybody's on there. And it's really difficult to gauge that grey area between uptake and worth your effort, particularly when you're working in an organisation that, like I said, I'm not going to go back to this, but we have no budget. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and to put effort and time into something means that we're spending somebody's rent money. And it's really important for us to make sure that value for money is right there at the top of what we're doing. And if we start on TikTok looking like Steve Buscemi in a backwards cap, that's not going to give us anything tangible out of that other than a slightly icky feeling. So it is that really difficult sort of grey areas of where do we go with that? And I think, to be honest, that needs to be led obviously by experts like yourselves, but also you just need to get a feel for it and know when it's time and get a bit of research done around it.
That's brilliant. And I think that the knowing when it's time, and I think there's also the starting new and actually having to expand what you're doing is a whole other challenge because of resource, whether it's budget or not, it's people's time. And sometimes I often advise many clients to stop doing things, to shut down multiple Twitter accounts. I'm working with one organisation, you could probably guess the sector. They've got over 800 accounts across with the organisation in their Twitter bio. That's just crazy. No one can coordinate or manage this much. So sometimes it's a case of having to rationalise things or closing down or just going, we get no engagement on this channel anymore. People have shifted across to something else. It's time to stop or to switch things down on this one and up on that one. And that's quite a hard conversation to have. It's not just a social media conversation, is it? It's a whole, we need to stop going to this trade show, or we need to stop advertising in this publication. It's pulling it back to the strategy and the plan while thinking about the shiny things as well.
Yeah, for me, it's a really interesting point you raised, John. I love your pragmatic approach to it. And I guess for me, thinking about what you said and giving a bit of guidance on it, typically I would be focusing on the main platform that you're already doing well on, Facebook, for example. When you've exhausted testing different content formats, because there are so many, Alison raised some really good points on that, right? Because my testing, if it was me and I wanted to expand engagement, because as we know on Facebook, it's always a struggle to drive organic engagement. But I would be testing different content formats on that, precisely as Alison said, but also have, maybe 10% of time focused on what platforms are emerging. What does the future look like? Because fundamentally, we've got a good view on what's happening down the road, that's one nice thing about, you know, these conversations, because we already know, and like your point was very eloquently made about dropping off the end, John, as in we know what platforms are coming next. We know this is not going, this being TikTok is not going away, right? So being able to find some time for experimentation, I know it's super tough in, you know, budget limited circumstances, but in these instances, and that's the beauty of organic social, we don't actually have to pay for this free reach. And there's a couple of things just to mention on TikTok here, and I'm no massive TikTok advocate, I've got no like axe to grind here in particular, but the demographics are shifting massively. Already there are 800 million monthly active users, which is massive. Bear in mind that Instagram, given the fact they are 7 years older, Instagram are at 1.3 billion. So it's not a massive delta between the two. And also 31% of their audience is over 30. So I think the demographics is actually quite different to what people typically might think. TikTok are pretty bad about displaying, like, you know, being really clear about their demographics, but that's what the latest data is saying, which makes it very interesting. And, you know, and the final thing I'll say is, like, because we've been talking about Instagram Reels, for example. So if you took like a level playing field and you were thinking, right, well, I've heard lots about Instagram Reels and lots about TikTok, which one should I go on? And let's say you have no audience on either. I've been looking at some experiments that have been run of late, and TikTok absolutely wipes the floor for Instagram Reels if you're building something from scratch. So it always takes a long time to build something from scratch, but also if you're trying to like weigh up where you should go, if you're going to be investing some of that 10% experimentation time, it would typically be around TikTok. That would be my typical recommendation on it.
Yeah, there is always so much to do as well, isn't there? And I think we've got getting away lightly. There's no Q&A in the Q&A button, but there's some great chat going on, and I can see some student university conversations in there. And for me, this brings on another level actually as well, that we've talked about where our audience are, but we mustn't forget the influencers of our audiences as well. So, you know, particularly around students, we know that students may fit the demographic of TikTok and you know, Instagram as well, but their parents, the ones asking all the questions, and there's a wonderful Facebook group at the moment where all the parents are absolutely in bits that they've dropped their firstborn off at university and don't know what to do with themselves now that they've got an empty bedroom at home. You know, the influencers are sometimes on a different social media platform to our core audience as well. So we need to think about the messaging on there.
Alison, I think that's a really interesting point, Luan, and the fact that you just mentioned Facebook groups there, which is something we really haven't covered yet. Yeah. We all mentioned that Facebook was actually one of the platforms we're using the most, and probably one of the ones we're seeing the most success from. But other than your page, there's actually so much more you can do on Facebook around messaging, adverts, but also groups. And actually, over the last 2 years, group activity has increased a huge amount as so many people set up new groups to engage with people in their local communities or support different people through everything that we've all been through. And so actually engaging within groups is something that takes time, but can drive huge results. In fact, I'm sure you don't mind me mentioning, I have a Facebook group, and it is the biggest driver of traffic to my website in terms of the social media channels. It performs better than things I do on Instagram or Twitter. And that's because I've really taken a lot of time to niche in on exactly what my audience on my Facebook group want and to provide value there. I think one of the most interesting changes Facebook has made in the last couple of years is that you can now join a Facebook group as a page. So there isn't that whole awkwardness about joining as your personal profile. So I'm really excited to see more and more organizations and brands using Facebook pages to engage in groups and finding the right sort of groups that doesn't feel too salesy or inauthentic, but actually places where they can provide value to make better relationships with people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things in there, isn't there, that I think Facebook groups are one of the biggest drivers for people using the platform, whether you're looking for questions among your peers or for your life about, you know, what's happening in your own communities, regionally, locally as well, but just the fact that you can interact as a page sometimes gets over the fact that people don't want to interact as themselves on behalf of their business. John, have you've got something to say on this?
Yeah, sorry, that's just where we're having the most success, is interacting as the page, because we're very place based. We're able to join the usual community groups, the place based community groups, the message boards, and we've got a strategy of directly posting into those, sharing into those, so that we're sort of driving greater organic interaction, and actually getting eyes on our posts, because most of our posts, we're not selling anything, it's information, it's making sort of community information, and we get an enormous amount of feedback, we get an enormous amount of comments, most of them admittedly fairly lumpy, but we're getting that engagement, and we know that we're getting those eyes on those posts. So if I've just been posting about issues with our repair service vans not being able to get diesel, but we're injecting that into all of our groups, all of our local areas. So we're getting in the thousands of reach in the last sort of couple of hours, because we're getting into the right places, and using those groups is absolutely invaluable to us.
Yeah. So you don't have to run a group, but you can get huge amounts of benefits from running a group as well. Lee has appeared on our screen, which I'm guessing that means it's time for us to start wrapping up. He's nodding and putting his thumb up. We could probably all four of us sit here and talk about this all day for hours and debate different things. I know we could, and probably start arguing as well as agreeing with each other as well. Alison, please do put a link to your Facebook group in there. I'm going to put a link to the webinar. Andy and I do a monthly update webinar. You're very welcome to join us. There is one this week, but we do them every month if you are still watching commsHERO events. Does anyone want to say anything to close? John, you need to have the final word, I think. It'd be wrong if you didn't.
I hate social media, and it's the bane of my life.
Thank you. But it keeps the rest of us in a job.
Exactly.
Yes. So thank you to those that have watched live. Thank you if you've watched the recording. We've all put our contact details. Hopefully you can see them in the chat or pick them up afterwards. We'd love you to get in touch with us, and thank you for listening.
Thanks all.
Wave.